I lay connected to machines that monitored my failing heart. They sat lakeside with matching sunglasses and raised bottles. The photo was posted 3 hours ago. I'd been waiting for them for 3 days. My heart fought to keep beating. Can you even begin to imagine that kind of betrayal? Lying there, literally fighting for my next breath, watching a photograph of the only people I had left in the world. My sister and my brother-in-law living it up, celebrating, while I was hours away from potentially coding on a hospital bed. The sheer coldness of it stole the air right out of my lungs, and believe me, I needed every molecule of air I could get. The doctors had told me my heart was giving up the fight. I'd been admitted after a terrifying episode at home. A sudden, crushing pain that felt like an elephant had decided to sit squarely on my chest. It turned out to be severe congestive heart failure, a culmination of years of ignoring symptoms and a cruel genetic predisposition. My only hope was an emergency heart transplant, but I was so sick, so unstable, that the waiting list was a long shot, and my medical team was focusing on stabilizing me enough for a temporary device, a VAD, to bridge the gap. For 3 days, I'd been a prisoner of the hospital room, a captive to the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of the monitors, and the suffocating silence of my isolation. I called them my sister, Sarah, and her husband, David, the moment I could talk after the initial procedures. Sarah was the closest family I had. Our parents had passed years ago, and we were all each other had left. She promised she would be there. She promised she would come straight away. She told me not to worry, that she loved me, and that she would handle everything. Everything, apparently, included a celebratory vacation while I was dying. That photo, that single horrifying square of light on my phone screen, was a punch to the gut that was worse than any pain my failing organ could inflict. It was a group shot, not just Sarah and David, but a couple of their friends as well. They were on a beautiful deck overlooking a sparkling lake, the kind of place that cost more for a weekend than I earned in a month. They were all beaming, holding up bright green, expensive-looking bottles champagne, I assumed. Sarah was wearing a new, vibrant dress, and her expression was one of pure, unadulterated joy. There was no sign of stress, no hint of worry, no shadow of the terrifying reality that her only sibling was clinging to life back home. The caption, which I had to read 3 times before I could process it, was equally as sickening. Finally got our much-needed R&R, cheers to new beginnings, new beginnings. What about my ending? I slammed the phone down on the bedside table, the small sound echoing deafeningly in the sterile room. A nurse immediately came in, thinking the commotion was a medical emergency. I just shook my head, tears blurring my vision. "No, nurse," I whispered, my voice raw and thin. "It's just my family. They just canceled." The nurse, bless her heart, gave me a look of deep sympathy, not knowing the true depth of the horror. Was I wrong to feel such consuming rage and sorrow? Was I wrong to plot my revenge against the people who were supposed to love me? Let me take you back. Let me tell you how we got here. It wasn't just Sarah being a selfish sister. It was a decade of slow, creeping entitlement and manipulation that came to a head at the worst possible time. Sarah and I were always different. She was the charming, outgoing one, the one who effortlessly made friends and seemed to glide through life. I was the quiet, studious one, the one who worked hard, saved meticulously, and believed in responsibility. When our parents passed, they left everything to both of us equally. The main asset was the family home, a beautiful, sprawling colonial house that sat on a decent plot of land. I loved that house. It held every memory of my childhood. Sarah, however, saw it as a financial obstacle. She wanted her cash now to fund her entrepreneurial dreams, which mostly consisted of half-baked ideas she'd abandon after 2 months. I, on the other hand, offered to buy her out over time, to maintain the family legacy, but she refused. She wanted a lump sum. The conflict over the house was the first major fracture. We were co-owners, and neither could force the other's hand without a costly legal battle. It was David, her husband, who came up with the solution. David was a smooth talker, a former real estate agent who always smelled faintly of expensive cologne and desperation. He convinced me that the best path was for me to sell my portion of the house to them at a discounted rate, and in exchange, they would guarantee me a lifelong lease on the basement apartment, rent-free with a small stipend for maintenance. It's a win, sis. He'd said, leaning over my small kitchen counter. We get the equity to start our business, and you get a stable, rent-free place to live forever. It's security for you, and we handle all the headaches. I was hesitant. It felt wrong, like giving away my birthright, but my job at the time wasn't stable, and the idea of permanent, rent-free housing was incredibly tempting, especially as my health issues were starting to subtly creep in, making work harder. I was young, trusting, and fundamentally believed that my sister would never truly leave me destitute. I signed the papers. I moved into the spacious but separate basement apartment, and they took over the main house. The deal was simple. I signed away my equity, and in return, I got the basement apartment, fully furnished with all utilities included, for life. This wasn't a casual agreement. It was a formally drawn-up, legally binding contract with explicit terms, notarized and filed. It was my safety net, the money I gave up being the cost of my secure shelter. For the first few years, it was fine. Sarah and David renovated the main house and seemed happy. They opened a little boutique shop with the money, which, as expected, failed spectacularly. I kept my head down, working my day-to-entry job from my basement space, quietly saving what I could and trying to ignore the constant noise from upstairs. But as their financial situation worsened, they started to change. The stipend for maintenance stopped. Then the utilities started to become too high, and they began hinting, then outright asking, for me to contribute, despite the contract stating otherwise. It started small, a request for $50 here, $100 there, always with a sad story about their current temporary setback. I gave in sometimes because I didn't want the tension. And honestly, they were still family, living right above me. But it escalated. The hints became demands. They'd stomp around, make loud comments about freeloaders within earshot, and started inviting their friends over for loud, late-night parties. Knowing my early schedule, I became the unwanted tenant, the family member they had successfully impoverished, and now resented for existing in the space they felt entitled to. Then came the final, devastating blow, my health crisis. The doctors were very clear. I had a ticking time bomb in my chest. The sudden hospital admission was the wake-up call I had tragically ignored for too long. My prognosis was poor without a transplant or a VAD. The hospital social worker asked me if I had an emergency contact, someone who could handle my affairs, bring me my things, and make sure my bills were paid. Naturally, I gave them Sarah's name. She was my sister. Who else was I going to call? I called her myself first. I told her the news, trying to keep the terror out of my voice. I described the machines, the pain, the cold reality of my situation. Her response was less than ideal. She cried yes, but it wasn't the sound of deep sorrow. It was the sound of panicked inconvenience. "Oh, no, 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 this can't happen right now," she sniffled. David got on the phone, his voice sickeningly calm and professional. "We're going to come, of course, absolutely," he assured me, "but we have a major, major deal closing this week. A business opportunity that could change everything for us. We'll be there as soon as we can, maybe tomorrow morning, definitely by the end of the day." I understood a little. Business was their obsession. I told them to please bring my laptop, my legal papers, and my special pillow. The simple comforts I needed. They promised. They hung up. I waited. Day 1 passed. No Sarah, no David. The nurse checked on me every few hours, asking if my family had made it. I kept shaking my head, my anxiety mounting with every passing minute. I needed those legal papers, the ones detailing the lifelong lease for the basement apartment, filed away in my fireproof box. I needed them because as soon as I was stabilized enough, I intended to update my will, and I wanted to make sure that the single most important asset I had left, the right to live in my home, was protected no matter what happened to me. I tried calling them multiple times, but my calls went straight to voicemail. I texted Sarah a simple plea: please, just drop off the box. I need it. No response. Day 2 passed. The nurse gave me a concerned look. They still haven't come, honey, she asked gently. I just shrugged, the exhaustion of my illness making it impossible to even summon the energy to be disappointed. My condition had stabilized slightly, but the anxiety was a constant, low, humming vibration under my skin. I was worried not just about my health, but about the ominous silence from upstairs. I knew them. When they went silent, it usually meant they were up to something. I tried calling David's phone, a quick ring, and then the automated voice saying the mailbox was full. I felt a cold dread start to pool in my stomach, and then came day 3. I woke up from a fitful, machine-assisted sleep, and the first thing I did was reach for my phone. Nothing. I tried calling Sarah one last time. It rang 3 times, and then a quick, sharp click, and it went to voicemail. She had declined my call. That was when I opened my social media. It was a habit, a desperate attempt to connect to the outside world from my sterile cage. And there it was, the post, the picture, the beaming faces, the raised champagne, the lake, the new beginnings. Posted 3 hours ago. They hadn't come because they hadn't been working a major business deal. They had been on a vacation, a celebration, a trip to toast their success while I was literally facing the possibility of death. The realization hit me with the force of a heart attack. I stared at the picture, the blood draining from my face. My sister, my own flesh and blood, had chosen a lakeside retreat and matching sunglasses over being by my side, or even just bringing me the documents I desperately needed. And then I saw it in the background of the picture, in the corner of the deck, a small, familiar detail. It was a distinctive, expensive patio umbrella that I knew for a fact belonged to their friends, the ones who owned a luxury cabin rental business near Lake Travis. I cross-referenced the friend's public profile, and there it was, a stream of vacation posts, all geotagged to the Lake Travis luxury cabins. They weren't just taking a little break. They were fully checked out, miles away, celebrating some unknown new beginning. And that's when the coldness hit me, a far more powerful emotion than the fear that had been my constant companion. It was the cold, hard clarity of a heart broken beyond repair. My sister and David had completely abandoned me. But more than that, I suddenly understood the new beginnings of PART. They weren't just celebrating a business win. They were celebrating the probable upcoming event of my death, because that's when they would truly be free. Free of my presence, free of the legal burden of the basement apartment, and free to sell the entire house at full market value, unencumbered by a lifelong lease. My lifelong lease. The thought was so cynical, so utterly cruel, that it made me gasp. So that's the situation I was in. I was lying in a hospital bed, my body failing, my only family on a celebratory, expensive vacation they had lied to me about. And I had suddenly realized their motive was not just simple selfishness, but an active, financial interest in my demise. They were banking on my heart giving up. And I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, what I did from that hospital bed, I want you to pause right now and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have forgiven them? Would you have just focused on getting better? Or would you have used the little strength you had left to fight back, to protect the last piece of security you owned? Tell me your thoughts right now, before you hear the end. I didn't pause for long. The panic attack gave way to a surge of pure, ice-cold adrenaline. My heart might have been weak, but my resolve was suddenly steel. I wasn't just going to lie there and let them win, let them profit from my illness and their own treachery. They had counted on me being too sick, too weak, and too trusting to fight back. They were wrong. They had forgotten that even a dying woman can still make a few phone calls. The first call was to my best friend, Marcus. Marcus was a corporate lawyer, meticulous, sharp, and intensely loyal. He answered on the first ring, his voice already laced with concern. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. I told him everything, the medical diagnosis, the 3 days of waiting, and the shocking social media post. I kept my voice flat, controlled, focused only on the facts. Marcus, I said, my voice barely a whisper, I need you to do 2 things for me. First, I need you to go to the house and retrieve the fireproof box in the basement. It contains the original, notarized copy of my lifelong lease agreement. I need a copy of that agreement sent to me and a second, certified copy couriered to a specific address, which I will give you. Second, I need you to call a specialist property lawyer, a very aggressive one, and tell them I am commissioning an immediate, temporary injunction. Marcus, the professional, didn't even ask why. Just give me the details. I gave him the lawyer's name, the one I had initially consulted with years ago, a fiercely protective woman named MS. Davies. Then I gave him the address for the courier, the office of MS. Davies. I explained to Marcus that the new beginnings they were celebrating was almost certainly the final stage of selling the house, probably to their friends who owned the cabin rental business, or to a developer who wanted the land. The contract stated that if I were to pass away, the lease would be dissolved, allowing them to sell the property unencumbered. But it also stated critically that they could not sell, mortgage, or otherwise transfer the title of the property while I was still alive without my explicit written consent, which would dissolve the lease, and that was a non-starter. This clause was in place to protect me from exactly what they were trying to do. They knew they couldn't get my signature, so they had simply abandoned me, hoping my health would take care of the problem for them. The moment they left for vacation, they had probably put the finishing touches on the transfer, rushing to close the deal while I was incapacitated and unable to object. The injunction was the only way to stop the sale dead in its tracks. Marcus moved with incredible speed. He drove to the house, but when he tried the basement door, it was locked with a new, heavy-duty padlock. They hadn't just left, they had actively tried to bar my access and admission of their guilt. David, the former real estate agent, was not an amateur. He knew the legal system. He knew that if I couldn't get the contract, I couldn't prove my claim quickly enough to stop a rushed sale. But David hadn't counted on Marcus's ruthlessness. Marcus simply called the police. He explained the situation calmly. The co-owner was in a medical emergency, needed vital legal documents, and the other co-owners had abandoned the property after illegally changing the locks to deny access. He didn't mention the heart failure or the abandonment. He just focused on the illegal lock change and the need to retrieve documents. The police, understanding the urgency of legal documents, authorized a locksmith to accompany Marcus. Within an hour, Marcus was back on the phone with me, his voice a low growl of satisfaction. I have the box, and I had the locksmith change the lock back to the original tumbler, and I secured the key. I also took a high-resolution photograph of the entire lease, page by page, and sent it to MS. Davies. The second part was the hardest, the most expensive, and the most satisfying. MS. Davies, who had received the digital copy and my instructions, was a force of nature. She immediately filed an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order (TRO) against Sarah and David, citing breach of contract, intentional infliction of emotional distress based on documented abandonment while I was in critical condition, and interference with my property rights. The key leverage was the specific clause in the contract: no transfer of title while I was alive without my consent. She attached my medical records, the notarized lease, and a screenshot of the social media post as evidence of their deliberate abandonment to push through a sale. The judge, presented with the grim facts of a dying sister being betrayed, granted the TRO immediately. The order was served on Sarah and David's home address and on the title company involved in the sale, simultaneously and electronically. This happened just after the New Beginnings champagne toast. It didn't take long for the silence to break. My hospital phone rang at 2 a.m. It was Sarah. She was hysterical. "What did you do? What is this notice? David's losing his mind. The deal is off. They're threatening to sue us for breach of contract, and we're losing our deposit. You can't do this to us. We're coming back tomorrow, I swear." I picked up the phone, took a slow, deep breath that hurt my chest, and spoke. My voice was calm, utterly devoid of emotion. "You lay connected to machines that monitored my failing heart, Sarah. You sat lakeside with matching sunglasses and raised bottles. The photo was posted 3 hours ago. I'd been waiting for you. For 3 days, my heart fought to keep beating." I paused, letting the words sink in. "Your new beginnings are canceled. The sale is blocked, and my lawyer, MS Davies, is preparing a formal suit for punitive damages against you, both for breach of contract and emotional distress." But you're dying," she shrieked, the panic overwhelming her. "You won't even need the apartment. Why would you ruin us over a place you won't be in for much longer?" And that was the final piece of the puzzle, the confirmation of the horror. I felt a surge of cold fury. "Whether I need it for 1 day or 50 years is irrelevant, Sarah. The contract is for my life, and since you violated that contract, abandoned me, and attempted to steal the only secure thing I have left in this world, I am going to make sure you suffer the maximum financial penalty legally possible. You won't sell the house until my medical team confirms I am fully recovered and stable enough to sign an agreement, and believe me, that will be a long time from now. Every day you hold that title, you are racking up interest on a mortgage you can no longer afford and incurring legal fees you can't pay. You wanted new beginnings. This is your new beginning. It's called bankruptcy and the full public disclosure of your disgusting, callous greed." I hung up the phone and finally, truly, allowed myself to cry. Not tears of pain or fear, but tears of bitter, cold relief. I was fighting back. The aftermath was exactly what I promised. MS Davies launched an aggressive legal campaign. The initial TRO was converted into a preliminary injunction, effectively freezing the house sale indefinitely. Sarah and David had to return from their ill-fated vacation early to a mountain of legal bills, a failed business deal, and a house they were now legally required to maintain, including utilities for my rent-free, lifelong apartment while being unable to sell it. The debt on the house, which they had refinanced to fund their failed boutique, was crippling them. The business partners who were buying the house sued them for the loss of the deal. Sarah and David quickly became social pariahs, their story of abandoning a dying sister becoming legendary in our small circle. The legal battle dragged on for months, a distraction that, strangely enough, helped me in my recovery. Fighting them gave me a reason to live, a fierce determination to not let their wicked plot succeed. I was stable enough to receive the VAD, the machine that would help my heart pump, and the surgery was a success. I was moved to a rehab facility and slowly, painstakingly, began my recovery. Sarah and David finally conceded. They were financially ruined. The legal fees, the interest on the mortgage, and the constant stress finally broke them. MS Davies negotiated a final settlement. I would sign a document allowing the house to be sold, but only under the condition that all proceeds exceeding the existing mortgage debt would be used to purchase a small, fully deeded condo in my name, with no liens or mortgages, thereby replacing my lifelong lease with a lifelong owned asset. And 2, the remaining profit, if any, would be immediately transferred to a trust established for my long-term care and recovery. They walked away with nothing but debt, a damaged reputation, and the cold, hard realization that their greed had utterly destroyed them. They had tried to profit from my death and instead bankrupted themselves. I never spoke to them again, and they moved across the country to escape the shame. I am now recovering well, the VAD working perfectly, and I am the proud sole owner of a beautiful small condo that I can call truly my own. I have my security, I have my life, and most importantly, I have peace. The moral of this story is not just about family betrayal, but about the insidious nature of entitlement. They felt entitled to my portion of the inheritance, entitled to my space, and ultimately, entitled to my life. They learned the hardest lesson of all. You cannot steal security from a person who is fighting for their life without facing the most severe consequences. It was a terrible, painful journey, but I came out of it not just alive, but finally, truly free. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. I know it's a shocking one, and it was the hardest experience of my life, but I felt compelled to share it. Like this video if you were on my side in this horrible situation. Subscribe for more stories like this that delve into the dark side of family dynamics and betrayal. And please share your final thoughts on this whole mess, on Sarah and David's unbelievable callousness, and on the ultimate revenge in the comments section below. What would you have done with the small condo? Invest it or live in it? I'll see you all in the next story.